All right. Good evening, Cyclones everywhere, and welcome to the Iowa Stater Book Club event. Tonight's event will feature the book The Butterfly Effect by Rachel Mans McKenny. My name is Matt Van Winkle with the ISU Alumni Association, and joining me is Kirsten Cracklio, also from the Alumni Association. Kirsten, good evening. It's a beautiful fall day here in central Iowa.
Hello. Yes, we're excited for tonight's event.
We are.
All right. Well, for all of you attending tonight, go ahead and put in the chat what city or state you're watching from. Also, throughout tonight's event, we encourage you to type in any questions or comments you may have for our author, Rachel.
Absolutely. At the end of the evening tonight, we'll be selecting one person at random who puts a comment in the chat. Again, you can let us know where you're watching from. We know we have people, Cyclones everywhere, as we say, watching with us tonight. So please let us know where you're watching from. And before we get started, we like to say a quick thank you to our sponsor of tonight's event, Dog-Eared Books here in Ames. They are the official sponsor of the Iowa Stater Book Club event. Dog-Eared is owned by two Ames natives, Ellen Grimm and Amanda Lepper. Ellen is also an ISU grad. And Dog-Eared Books is located on Main Street in Ames. You can also purchase books from their website to be shipped to you, dogearedbooksames.com. Check them out on social media. They're on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. You can search Dog-Eared Books Ames. And Amanda and Ellen actually sent us a short video. Let's take a look.
Hi, Iowa State alumni. It's Amanda
and Ellen,
proud owners of Dog-Eared Books here on Main Street in Ames, Iowa. We're excited to sponsor another meeting of the Iowa Stater Book Club, and we're super excited that you have chosen The Butterfly Effect by Rachel Mans McKenny.
Rachel's been a friend of our store since we opened, and we're so proud to highlight her book, which has been a customer favorite of ours.
Recently, we had a customer visiting from the country of Georgia who read this book specifically to familiarize herself with what Ames is like and many of the sites that Rachel does such justice in her book. We look forward to what she has in the future for us to read, and we hope you enjoyed this month's read.
Thank you again, Amanda and Ellen at Dog-Eared Books. We also want to take a second to thank our ISU alumni members. Because of you, we're able to offer this awesome student and alumni programming like the Iowa Stater Book Club. So thank you for your commitment to Cyclones everywhere and supporting your alumni membership. If you're not a member of the Alumni Association and value programming like this, please consider joining us today. You can visit isualum.org/join to get started. Again, that is isualum.org/join.
It's a great time to join, Kirsten. As you know, Jeff Johnson, our president and CEO, is celebrating 25 years at the Alumni Association. So we have some special member pricing for annual and life membership. So check it out at isualum.org/join. All right, we'd like to introduce the author of our book tonight, Rachel Mans McKenny. She's a writer and humorist with work published in McSweeney's, Elle Magazine, and the New York Times. She is also an Iowa State alumna and works in ISU's Academic Success Center. She co-hosts the podcast Blind Date with a Book. So we'd love to welcome Rachel to the studio. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for all of you for having me here, and hello to everybody online.
Wonderful. We'll get the discussion started with some questions that Matt and I have for you. We'll also be adding in comments and questions from people in the chat, so feel free to add your thoughts as we go along. Our first question tonight is this book touches on so many topics: love and loss, friendship, strained family relationships, student stress. Can you share more about when and how Greta's story came to be?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started writing this book around 2015, 2016. I had two young children at the time, and we live in the Ames area, and a common place to take them would be Ryman Gardens. And as we were walking around the butterfly wing one day, the kids were delighted as usual, and we went out into the hallway. They had this exhibit of butterfly specimens on the wall with all of their scientific names. And as I was looking at the specimen, there was a butterfly whose scientific name was Greta Oto. And I thought, that actually sounds like someone who would work here. That sounds like a character of a book. And that little spark was the first detail that I knew about what this book was going to become. I sat and I chewed on that name, and I thought about the place, and I thought about some of the other themes that were coming up in my books, and I just decided to start writing a draft. The first draft of this book actually was told from 3 different perspectives. So it was told from Greta's perspective. It was also told from Meg and Danny's perspective. So it alternated back and forth between all of the different people's perspectives. But when I sent the book to my agent, she said, this isn't really Meg or Danny's story. I know they're in it, they're important, but it's not their story. This is actually Greta's story. And so I had to do a rewrite of the book. It was about 60,000 words that I had to cut and redo completely. And as I was rewriting the book and coming to that heart of the book, those other themes of loss and friendship, and especially caretaking, was a really important one for me to explore, and that idea of caretaking and family relationships. So that was something on my mind. Yeah.
I love that spark and being inspired by the small details around you. I love that.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
I'm sure a lot of our viewers and listeners are familiar with Rhyming Garden, so it's kind of fun for them to put that into perspective and know where that came from. That's very cool. So Greta is notoriously grumpy. Were you worried about how readers might react to an unconventional kind of main character?
Absolutely. And I think rightfully so.
Yeah.
As I was coming up with the kernels of this book, I'm also an avid reader. I read hundreds of books every year. It's just part of who I am and my DNA, I think. And one of the books I was reading at the time was A Man Called Uwe by Frederick Bachman, which is a really well-known book. It was made into a movie with Tom Hanks. A Man Called Otto. They renamed him for US audiences.
Yeah.
But something I loved about that book is that Uwe is such a grumpy character, and yet we fall so deeply in love with him. We root for him so deeply by the end of the book. We cry for him, all those things. And I started to wonder, if we come as readers to really root for this older male character, what would it be like to have a very grumpy young female character? How much leniency would the audience give this character? What kind of boundaries, not Midwest nice, right, are we allowed to sort of push? So I wanted to play with those boundaries, play with that idea of the character. And it was hard to write her sometimes because I didn't agree with everything she decided to do, but it did make her more compelling. And ultimately, I've had people who absolutely hated her and were not trying to tell me that. And I've also had people who deeply connected with her. And I think either experience is totally valid as a reader. It's all in how you read the book.
When you're writing a story about a character like that, do you almost like do you like embody that person somewhat, or do you have to like put your mindset into that person? Are you like as you're living your daily life, is it almost like you have to think about how to write this story and maybe lived experiences and stuff like that? Or how do you approach it?
Yeah, I think you get kind of so deeply into the plot and the story of the character that you do sort of speak in the narrative. You feel what the character will do and say next.
Yeah.
But I did at points think, oh goodness, is she really going to do this? Like, this is not the thing to do. I like Jan's question about, it's contrast to have like grumpy Greta working with such a light and lovely creature like a butterfly. I think it kind of is, right? She has these edges. But also I feel like the butterfly is one of our most intentional symbols of transformation. And I think that that's something you see in Greta by the end, whether it's like, she doesn't grow wings. She's not a completely different creature by the end. You can still see who she is, but I think you can see some of the marked changes that she makes in her life by the end of the book.
I have to share just a funny side story. So I have a 5-year-old. She just started kindergarten, and we just grew butterflies from home. So we got like a little starter kit. The Amazon has everything, right? They have even butterflies. Or they'll start as little caterpillars in a little cup. And when it first comes, it comes in this little like jar, and it's got goop on the bottom, and it's their food. They eat it to grow. And my daughter just thought, oh, they look so gross. She was like almost scared of them at first. But then of course they make their cocoons and they hatch into beautiful butterflies. And by the end, she just loved them, and she was like sad when they left. So,
and there's
the
something
evolution
so special about, involving kids in nature that early. And even in the gross parts, we went and got down in the dirt with a lot of bugs in the garden while I was writing this book, and the kids are not bug phobic, which I appreciate.
Well, we heard from Ellen and Amanda from Dog-Eared Books. It sounds like you know them very well. With the Ames connection there. it's not very common that, people from Ames see their hometown depicted in fiction books. So tell us about your connection to Ames and why it was important for you to center the story here in Ames and Iowa State as well.
Absolutely. Well, I moved to the area in 2012, and I was, or 2010. And as you said, I'm an alumna of the university for graduate school. And I really just fell in love with Ames as a college town and just as a unique place. I think the character of the place can feel so big and so small at the same time. And especially with the students coming in and out, it feels like two very different places in the summer versus the school year. And that's just such an interesting characteristic about the place. But for me, it was also about centering a Midwestern story in the Midwest. And it's fun to have book club conversations. I've had book club conversations with people in Australia, and I know readers that I've had in Germany, and to have them read not just a book set in New York City or a book set in LA, but a book set here, and to know, no, this is a real place. Some of the places are somewhat fictionalized, but you could come and visit Ryman Gardens anytime you want and come to campus.
I love that they said that some of their readers that came in were buying the books to get to know a little bit more about Ames. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is one of the highest compliments for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And that's a great transition too to talking more about Ryman Gardens, as obviously it shows up a lot in this text. And I'm curious from a personal perspective, what your favorite spot to visit in the gardens is and why.
Yeah, well, of course, I love the butterfly exhibit. I do have to say, they were so kind in letting me do research in there and go behind the scenes a little bit. But the end of the novel could absolutely never happen. So that would
caveat there.
Definitely a caveat for that. But other places that I love, I really love the vegetable garden that they have annually. And I love that they participate in Row for the Hungry. And so they're able to grow that food for the local food banks. I think it's just such a meaningful way for the gardens, not just to be a beautiful spot, but also a spot that actually impacts the community, both inside and out. I think it's wonderful.
Absolutely.
They have that whole new section in the back too. They opened, I think, maybe a year or so ago. That beautiful new expansion in the back. They've got the little pond, the pool back there, and
yeah,
it's just a beautiful place, and really the kind of the front porch of Ames and Iowa State as you're coming off Highway 30. It really is a pretty place.
It is, and if people haven't come out and seen the sort of seasonal events in the fall and in the winter, they do like a Spirits in the Gardens with like thousands of pumpkins.
Yes.
And then the lights in the gardens that are it's one of our annual traditions now to go do those.
They really have a cool event for basically every season. They do the winter wonderscape with the lights that you can walk through, as you mentioned, the pumpkins in the garden.
Yep.
It's something year round for people, and it's just a real gem here in Ames. So Rachel, you write in your acknowledgments about the research you did preparing for the book. Do you have any favorite moments or maybe some surprising facts that you learned along the way as you were writing The Butterfly Effect?
Absolutely. And some of them came in the writing process and some of them came later as I was interacting with readers. I'll share a little bit about each one.
Sure.
My early drafts of this book, I just needed to get the story out, because if you've ever tried to write a big project, it's extremely daunting. And so I forced myself not to get stuck in the research for my first draft. And so I would go along and I would add a comment to myself, literally, that said, add science here. So, I'd get to a part in the narrative where it's like, okay, well, I know I need to go down a rabbit hole of some sort, figure out what component goes here. And then I got to spend the next several drafts sort of pulling those pieces apart and seeing what would be interesting to add. So I read so many entomology books. I was lucky to have access to the university library and just check out a big stack of library books. And I tried to think about meaningful connections that insects would have to some parts of the text. So I really loved the section where she's talking about her father. And, he wasn't an extremely caring dad, but he was there. And learning about the water bug, the giant water bug, and how it carries its eggs. It's the male, and his job is to raise the babies and to keep the eggs safe on his back. There's some of those really interesting sort of reverse expectations relationships in the insect world that I thought were really interesting to explore. But I also got a chance as I was talking with readers because, bug people are different people. They're awesome. They're excited to find a book that's about entomology, which I love. One of my first book club discussions that I had was over Zoom with a book club in Minnesota. And one of the readers was telling me, because this was during COVID lockdowns, she was telling me about her neighbor's COVID project. He worked in transportation and logistics. And because so many things were not getting shipped out on time, they had cockroach infestations in one of their warehouses. And supposedly only female cockroaches have wings. And so he collected all of the wings and made art out of them. He actually made a copy of the ceiling in the Sistine Chapel out of cockroach wings.
Like you said, bug people are different. Yes.
Bug people are different. I was like, my
COVID
jaw
times
just
were
dropped.
different. That was a different time.
None of us, sourdough starters or cockroach
Yes.
art, whatever you did, we respect
Sure,
it. It's
sure.
fine. But I actually had her send me a picture of this. I'm like, no way.
Of course.
No, you could see it was the fingers of David touching. It was hilarious. I just, you learn something new every day, and it's great when people can share that with you.
I love that.
Rachel Mans McKenny, the author of The Butterfly Effect, joining us here on the Iowa Stater Book Club. If you're watching, we hope you've read the book, and if you have any questions, please do leave them in the comments and the chat on YouTube, and we'll get to those here in just a little bit. Kirsten, you got anything you want to ask here?
Yeah, I would love to know, this was your first published book, I believe. And what tips would you give to other new or aspiring authors based on what you experienced through your process?
Yeah, my biggest advice is not to give up on yourself. This was the first book I had published, but it was not the first book I wrote. And so realizing it's a process like anything else, and that every project has a purpose, even if it wasn't to be read by, thousands of people, and that's okay. But also, when you feel something is good, fight for it. The agent that told me to switch everything to Greta's perspective, I totally agreed with her, but then she still didn't end up liking the book. And so I had to find another agent because I believed in the project enough to know that it was going to be something I believed in. So, fight for it. And when it comes to actually writing a book, I would suggest outlining a little bit. It's very tempting to just want to sit down and be like, I'm going to write 3,000 great words, and then you just do that over and over again. You're like, eventually I'll get to a novel, but it's much easier when you go in with a sense of structure ahead of time.
Yeah, I love too when you were talking about even, there's going to be a science component, but you just don't know what it is
Right.
yet, and just leave a block and keep going, and come back to it. Because I think we do that in our writing too for Iowa Stater Magazine. You know what the vision is, but sometimes you're going to have to go back and get the nitty gritty details.
And I don't know about you, but I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and so when I'm working on a 10-page research paper, that's one thing. I can go back and continually self-edit, but when you're working on a big project, you need to think of the bigger vision and just let it sit until you have a whole first draft, or else you really truly never get to your first draft. Yeah.
That's valuable.
I'd love to know too a little bit about your work at Iowa State. So you're in the Academic Success Center here at Iowa State. Tell us a little bit about the work that you do with our students.
Yeah, so I work in the Academic Success Center, and I run the writing consultations. So the students who work in my program see students across campus for anything they're working on, whether it's a paper, a presentation, a proposal, a speech, resume, whatever it is. They see students every single day for free. And then I help train those students. So I have a core team that I get to know really well. I help teach them how to be good consultants and help their peers as much as possible. It's a great job.
You had to remind me that, so I graduated from Iowa State a decade ago, and you had to remind me that you were one of my instructors when you were in grad school.
Yeah.
So it's all clicking now. I'm remembering the class and everything. So
yes, I taught public speaking as a graduate student, and Matt was one of my students. I was like, that name is so familiar. Why is that? Oh, yeah, yep.
That's great. So we hear you're actually working on another book as well. So can you share anything about that?
Yeah, the news just broke on Friday, actually. So my next book is going to be published next fall. It's actually going to be a romance novel. So I'm going to publish a romance novel under a different name, partially because the cover of The Butterfly Effect looks a little bit like a romance novel, and it's not. So I wanted to make sure to keep my genres very distinct. So I'll be releasing a book called The Adaptation about two rival authors competing to release a retelling of the same classic novel. And of course, they fall in love because reasons. So I just wanted something light. It was also my pandemic project. So it was not disgusting, involved no insects whatsoever in my garage. It was just a romance novel.
What was that experience like to write a book during that time? Obviously everyone had a little bit of extra time on their hands, but what was that process like during COVID to write a book?
Yeah, it was pure escapism. You need something to look forward to, and you need to know there's a happy ending. And that's what romance is really good for. What's great about a romance novel is you can give everyone the ending that they deserve, not just in love, but also in life. So it's pure, wonderful escapism.
Well, before we wrap up, we want to give people a chance to leave their comments, leave their questions in the chat, and let us know again where you're watching from. We're going to be giving away a prize here in just a little bit to somebody who leaves a comment in the chat. So it could be you. Right now we have six entries, so you have a pretty good chance if you enter your name in to get a nice Iowa State prize package as well. But Rachel, anything you want to share with people just about this book? Anything you want to leave people with that read this book, or any final thoughts?
Yeah, I'd say, there's a lot of good Midwest authors out there. Check all of us out. One person who, if you haven't read yet, if you enjoyed the characters and sort of the Midwest setting of this book, if you haven't read anything by J. Ryan Stradall yet, definitely consider picking up one of his books. He wrote Kitchens of the Great Midwest, Lager Queens of Minnesota. Really, really excellent books. There are a lot of us working out there. And go to your local section of your bookstore and check them out as well. There's a good one at Dog-Eared.
I just got a message from Jeff Johnson that reminded me that President Winterstein is an entomologist. So
Yes.
I don't know. Did you use her at all for any references in this book, or?
I didn't. I did at the time that I was getting this book published. I was teaching. I was still teaching in the English department, and I got to go to a reception at her house at the big presidential mansion. And I think I went up to her and I was like, President Winterstein, just so you know, I'm publishing a book about bugs. She very politely, oh, that's wonderful. She was talking to many other people, so we weren't able to get into it too much. But it is wonderful to have a fine woman of entomology leading our university, for sure.
Well, we'll have to get her down to Dog-Eared Books to pick up a copy of The Butterfly Effect.
Yeah. Sure.
Kirsten, anything else before we part ways with Rachel?
No, I think this has been great, and I'm so glad that you were able to join us this evening and share a little bit more about this wonderful book that really shines a light on Ames and Iowa State.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Well, stick around. We're going to give away a prize. So we'll pull up our prize drawing here, and we'll pick a winner for our ISU prize pack. It is Cyhawk week after all, so whatever you get, it's going to be something hopefully good that you can represent. Are you going to be watching the game, Rachel? Are you a big football fan, a cycling football fan?
Of course. Yeah. Go Cyclones.
Yes.
All the way.
Saturday, 2:30 against Iowa. Nancy is our winner. Nancy Keever, congratulations. We'll be in contact with you about receiving your prize from the Alumni Association. And we want to thank everyone again for participating and watching with us tonight. Rachel, thank you so much for hopping on with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, folks. Have a great night.
All right. Well, if you enjoyed tonight's discussion and feel compelled to keep the connection between Cyclone alumni and friends strong, join the Iowa State Alumni Association. You can visit isualum.org/join, and we look forward to seeing you at our next book club. Kirsten, thanks for doing this. This was fun.
Very fun. Thank you, Matt.
All right, everybody. Have a great night, and we'll see you next time.